If you could just also switch your video off, because that'll allow all the commissioners to be reflected on the first page. That just makes sure that we can see everyone who's speaking as part of the commission. With that, let's go ahead and get started. As usual, we're starting with an approval of the minutes. Carlos shared the meetings for February 8th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as they're stated? Delvin moves so. There's a second from Jen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Great, we've got the minutes approved and they'll be entered into the record. Next thing is an update on the letters where we've sent to the County Council on legislation we've already reviewed. The letters have been sent out. Carlos very helpfully let us know that the letter on Bill 4520, which is the data bill, it'll be included in a report being prepared by county staff right now. So it's my hope that the amendments that the subcommittee worked so hard on will be considered by the commissioners in their review. And lastly, we have our special meeting scheduled for this month for Tuesday, the 23rd. We'll be hearing from Dr. Felicia Bell, which we're very excited about. Big thanks to Alicia for making the connection for us. As Robin had included in his most recent email, we are wanting to create an opportunity to hear from other experts, folks who are looking at this issue and analyzing it from outside of the system. So our hope is that this will be the first of other such events going forward. Dr. Bell has indicated that she'd like to pair her presentation with possibly one other expert, and we're trying to see if we can nail someone down for that as well. If that does happen, we'll send information your way as soon as possible. If not, it'll be a solo presentation with Dr. Bell. Any questions about the letters or about the meeting on the 23rd?
What time is the meeting on the 23rd?
It'll be at 6:30.
And I have not sent out a link for that yet, so when I do, you all will get it.
And once we know if we're going to have a second presenter or not, we'll have a better sense if it'll be if it'll be an hour-long meeting or a 90-minute meeting. So let's move right ahead to our substantive agenda items. First, we're going to hear from the Subcommittee on Policing in Schools about Bill 721. The PACS has extensively discussed the issue of school resource officers. We discussed this a lot during our, when we were considering Bill 4620. As we indicated in our letter to the County Council, we've had more public input on this bill than any other issue before us to date. We've had a chance to review materials from the MCPD, student groups, school principals, parents, community members, and other stakeholders. And in addition to the statement prepared by the Policing and Schools Subcommittee after their extensive review, and recognizing that our review is just one part of the overall process by which the county government considers legislation, we also had a chance to look at the hearings. Our process does indicate that we won't weigh in on any legislation until the public hearings. There have been hearings on both those proposed bills, and the Board of Education has had its own separate hearing as well. And links to those have been shared with you. The videos are recorded. If you weren't able to catch all of them, you can go back and look at those in the future. So today we'll hear from Subcommittee Chair Jasmine Williams about their proposal about the subcommittee's proposal to not do a full review in light of the fact that we've just sent a letter about the other bill. We will first hear from the subcommittee and then we'll take some comments and questions. So with that, Jasmine, you have the floor.
Thank you. So Bill 721 is inadequate in addressing the concerns raised by community members, does not take into account the majority of voices of the children, youth, and adults, both in our communities and our schools, and puts the onus on MCPD to fix a program that is over-policing our youth. The proposed changes in Bill 721 are also inconsistent with the approach to resolve the problems of SROs in the bill we have already endorsed, so we will not be recommending the bill for a full PAC review.
Thank you, Jasmine. Does anyone have any questions for the subcommittee or comments on the bill they'd like to offer this time?
Again, I oppose us that the bill should have been looked at, but because we had gone in the other direction, it was probably useless. So I just want to go on record as saying that I think we should have had the opportunity to look at it.
Yeah, I'm already on record saying that as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Susan, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just wanted to let the commission know, in case you had not heard, that the Joint Public Safety and Education Committee has postponed their hearings on March 18th for these two bills, and they're going to wait until sometime in June after the school weighs in. And also, Councilmember Nancy Navarro has a proposed amendment that has more of a cluster officer impact as well. And the county executive mentioned back in testimony before about the other bill that he has a similar type of proposal. So I just want you guys to know that there are different proposals out there that still provide some policing of schools, and not trying to guide work or anything, but just in case you wanted to weigh in on those proposals, if your committee wants to look at those. So.
Thanks so much, Susan. Eric, I see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This morning, County Executive Mark Elrich spoke to the District 18 Democratic Breakfast and spoke about the school resource officers, and said that it was his understanding that the police were going to discontinue the school resource officer program, that they will be reconfiguring the patrol beats in order to continue to maintain the necessary school security required by state law, but that they were going to discontinue the school resource officer program.
Thanks, Eric. Susan, did you want to add something about that?
No, his proposal is a cluster officer model where police are assigned to schools. They quote, adopt a school, and they will check in every day, and they'll still have contacts with the school, and they'll respond under certain circumstances. And there will be some proposed modifications. I don't think they've got details on that yet. And it's very similar to Councilmember Navarro's proposal too, which I don't think will be proposed publicly until the Joint Committee weighs in later in June sometime.
We had a comment in the chat room from Deborah. Madam Chair, if you wanted to.
Sure, that over 200 MCPS staff have also supported the removal of police in schools, and there's a link for folks that want to access that. This is really great to hear. I think we can continue to monitor this issue if there are further bills proposed or further policies. I trust that the Police and School Subcommittee will keep a keen interest in that. For now, since it doesn't seem like folks have many other comments to add, let's go ahead and vote on the recommendation to not do a full review process.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I just have a question. This is
Please,
Justin. I apologize. I'm having some. So if the only question I have, which I think I'm a little confused on, I thought that part of the amendment or part of the go forward plan was also about counseling in the schools and being able to provide support.
Yes.
Is that out of the window with this kind of, I guess I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So this is not in lieu of, it's just in addition, we're going for clusters and still in addition to.
Right, I just didn't know if the commission wanted to say, hey, this is a new proposal that people are talking about. Do you as a commission want to weigh in on how you think that should look?
So I will say, so Councilmember Navarro's proposal adopts what's usually referred to as a local care team model, where police officers, where her proposal is to remove police officers, but have them be part of these like cluster teams. So it would be law enforcement, mental health professionals, behavioral health professionals. And it's designed after this model called the Cahoots model that was launched in Denver, Colorado, where instead of having them physically in the building, they're still a part of the community in these local care team models. And she proposed that, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, she sent the memo to County Executive Elric. And I will say, Jasmine and I have Jasmine and I looked at the memo when she sent it, and it's not a bad model, because it does accomplish what we recommended in terms of removing SROs from the schools, but it still allows them to be parts of the community, which is some things I think Nadia has mentioned, that they could be used in different ways. And a lot of folks have talked about them being able to partner with community members in different ways as opposed to physically being in the school. I hope that answers your question, Drew. Justice, sorry. I hope that answers your question.
It does answer my question, but I guess the question is the question for a vote. I'm sorry to be procedural for a second. Is the question for a vote that we should be considering that legislation as it is coming, or is the question for the vote that we should take into consideration the approval we've already done?
So we've outlined a very thorough process for reviewing proposed bills that are either recommended to us for review, or we want to review ourselves. And we've also spoken about how the extensive process we want to ensure whenever we're looking at a bill, we want to make sure we do it properly, we follow the process. We have the subcommittee look at it, we have consultation with stakeholders. We want to do a good job and make sure that our vote is informed. Right now, what we're saying is the bill as it currently stands, understanding that these other proposals are not exactly legislation right now. They're just proposals that are ideas out there in the universe, right? The bill as it currently stands, 721 as introduced, the subcommittee is saying we're not going to do a full legislative review the way we did for the other bills. What I'm also hoping is that as we sort of move into our proactive agenda and things we want to recommend, that all the different subcommittees are in conversation with whatever's going on and being considered by the different council members or by the county executive, and that can inform the recommendations we give, either in the report at the end of this year or in the final report that our commission does 3 years from now. But this is just specifically about Bill 721 as it's currently introduced. We would be voting on the subcommittee recommendation that we don't do a full legislative review. Does that clarify?
I have a concern that there's the other bill that the Katz bill, and then there's the Navarro bill. The Navarro bill, to me, sounds like we're just gonna have cops hanging out around the corner watching, instead of being in a positive vein. The kids will see the cop sitting around the corner. It just does not make sense that we are not pushing a positive model on police community relations with the young people. As I looked at the hearings were pretty well stacked with folks who were opposed, which is normally the way that the wheel works. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. But I am concerned that we haven't even had a discussion on the Navarro bill and the other one, but we just pushed ahead right away with the other one.
Sure thing. And just to clarify, Mr. Ricks, Councilmember Navarro's proposal is not currently a bill. When it does become a bill, we can consider that if that is something that the commissioners are interested in.
Yeah, I understand, but it's closer to what Eric was saying that the county executive made an announcement on.
Sure thing. Ms. Brownson?
Yeah, just again, to reiterate the parliamentary concern, if we're going to have a vote on the subcommittee's recommendation, then we need to cut off discussion, and we need to ask whether there's further discussion on that recommendation, and then we need to go ahead and have the vote. The other items that have to do with future concerns about, what the county executive is saying, what Councilmember Navarro is saying, really don't have a direct impact on this vote. So can we just take this vote and then we can talk about these other things? If it's your agenda, you can, but but I think it's getting a little confused. So it would be helpful if we could just take this vote.
I agree.
that's
And
my-
if I might just say, I'm going to move to call the question and proceed to a vote.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and do
Second.
that now.
Well, what was the motion?
So the motion is to either approve or say yes to the subcommittee recommendation, or disapprove or say no to the subcommittee's recommendation. And Jasmine, if you just want to read out that last sentence of the recommendation one more time.
Bill 721 is also inconsistent with the approach to resolve the problems of the SROs, of the problems of SROs in the bill we have already endorsed. So we will not be recommending the bill for a full PAC review.
So we're voting on whether to subject Bill 721 to a full PAC review. All those who approve or would like to vote yes, please go ahead and do so in the chat.
Just one clarification.
Yes, go ahead, Robert.
A yes vote means that we will not be reviewing the bill.
That is correct.
Thank you.
A yes vote on the subcommittee recommendation to not review, do a full review of the bill at this time. As a reminder, we can all vote yes, no, or abstain, whichever works for you. Okay, I think that is everyone's vote. That is an 11-2 question that we are not moving forward with a full PAC review of Bill 721. And I will, if folks would like to weigh in on other proposals around policing in schools, please reach out to Jasmine and Dalbin and share your thoughts with the subcommittee. Eric, I'm not sure I fully understand. Would you like to clarify that piece?
Sherry made the motion of the previous question. It was a motion that is not debatable. It's not amendable. It's a motion to close debate. It requires 2/3 vote. And that was what was then in order, but it was ignored. And then we went ahead and had to vote as though the motion for the previous question had passed. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, okay.
And this is all spelled out in the county's training in the use of parliamentary procedure, which is required for all members of boards and commissions.
Thanks, Eric. And I know you brought that concern up in the previous meeting. We'll review that again prior to the next meeting. Let's move ahead to the next agenda item, which is to hear updates from all the subcommittees. Did the Policing in Schools subcommittee have any updates other than the statement you just shared?
Just that beginning next Monday, we'll be meeting from 6 to 6:30 to start mapping out our work plan and look at where we can make certain recommendations. So we're open to any feedback that you folks want to send us via email.
Thanks, Dalben. Let's move ahead to the discretionary policing subcommittee. That's Cherie, Justice, and Robin.
Yeah, I think we are going to meet, and the date totally escapes me. Robin and Justice will probably have to.
The 17th.
The
17th.
Okay. And I think in addition, I think that's where we are in addition to the letter that we have sent forward.
Yeah, just a little additional. I think we'll be discussing some work on the incidence of traffic stops in Montgomery County. If people are interested, there's been some additional work done on this, and I think it's highly relevant.
Thanks, Robin. Let's move on to the. Does anyone have questions for the discretionary policing subcommittee? And if not, we can move right ahead to emergency response. Jen, would you like to share about our subcommittee? Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
hello, everybody. No, that's good. It's just, it's good to see everybody. We did have a meeting, I don't know what day it is, last week. And there's actually a lot happening. I'm on a lot of different committees that are all discussing the same type of things. Our minutes from our meeting are published, thanks to Carlos. I put them on the site. But there are a couple of updates that have happened since our meeting, things that I've learned just from other committees that I sit on. So a real quick update. The county is looking at, there are some definite long-term goals and short-term goals regarding how we react and respond to mental health crises in the county. The long-term goal, which is easier to tell you about, is that and I'm looking at my notes, which are on a screen higher. They're not written on my ceiling, just so you know if I look funny. I'm reading my notes. There is a plan in the works to make a restoration or a diversion center down county near the Seven Locks facility, which will be moving and changing. It's going to take like 3 to 5 years to rebuild and redesign that center. So that is the delay in getting an actual restoration center, like a place. The county owns these buildings, and it's going to have to do with just moving personnel and redesigning things. And that center will be able to house short-term and long-term, well, 3-day is long-term, but when you're in crisis, you're counting hours. So a short-term is like a 23-hour stay, and it will also be able to hold like a 3-day kind of stay if there's like a detox or something more serious involved or waiting for other beds. It'll be staffed by nurse practitioners, doctors, on-call mental health clinicians, behavior experts, social workers, and therapists. There's also a big peer component that they're working to, and I think that's going to be part of this cahoots thing. I'm kind of seeing things all come together, which is exciting. You know me, I'm going to keep squawking until there's a component of this building that is for the IDD, autism, and that whole piece, because so many of our folks with IDD and developmental disabilities and autism all have comorbidities of mental health crises. So I am going to be hopefully involved in that. A couple other things have happened on the side where my voice is finally being heard on that component too. So that is good. Let me just scroll down here. We're still working on short-term kind of what we're going to do in the short term. And that is in addition to the cahoots training that Dr. Santiago is trying to arrange. There's trying to come up with a plan, like the crisis center beds are opening again, which is great news. That's going to happen on the 22nd of March. There'll be more beds open, but we're really trying to, there is work happening. The crisis center has hired 3 new social workers. There are still 3 more to hire. It was very low applications. They only got like 30 applications or some very small number of people applying for these positions. They're hard jobs, right? So they're hoping to have their full 6 social workers employed. And then from what I understand, the police department is kind of, there's some folks that are training to be super CIT folks, not just the regular CIT training that the officers go through in their academy, but you will have the choice if you want to be in one of these positions and as a responder to mental health crises, take on more of the critical training so you can be one of the more routine responders to these situations. And they will work hand in hand, to be 24 with the crisis center, or 7 in every district, of course, but we need about $1 zillion more for that. So I think they're going to be talking regionally, like an up county team and a down county team, and then another team placed around Picard, where that one will be 24/7. And then the CITs would be out in the just working the regular shift or patrol, whatever, until something, if they're needed for the crisis center to attend a call with them.
Thanks so much, Jen. Just in the interest of time,
Yeah.
I'll direct everyone to look at the minutes that Jen has prepared. Does anyone have any questions for what Jen has shared so far?
April 6th is our next meeting for anybody that.
And I just want to echo something Jen said earlier about trying to find appropriate talent to fill these amazing positions as we're building out these models. So if folks know of people looking into social work type positions, particularly folks from diverse backgrounds with different kinds of language abilities, Jen, that was one of the pieces.
Yeah, they have not had any Spanish speaking any other language actually applicants. So in this area, we need a lot of we need a lot more people applying that speak other languages. So
thank you so much. Let's move ahead to the next subcommittee, which is hiring and discipline. Alicia, will you be sharing on behalf of your subcommittee?
I can, and I think Nadia is still on. We've done quite a bit of work, a lot of conferring back and forth via email, and we did a Google Doc, which we collated our questions to submit to Chief Jones and Sergeant Brewer today. I'm not today, it was submitted on time, and hopefully that gave them some time to review them. And we met with Captain Kokinos. Did we already share this at the last? No, we met with Captain Kokinos regarding stops, and he gave us a presentation regarding the training that is implemented for officers, for in particular plainclothes officers, in regards to stops. There was some concern expressed about the recent death of Kwamena Okran. However, he was a young person in Gaithersburg. And it was interesting to learn or be reminded that Gaithersburg is not Montgomery County PD. Montgomery County does do training and offer training for officers in Gaithersburg, but they are not required to send their recruits to Montgomery County for training. So that was very interesting. But we learned quite a bit meeting with Captain Kokinos, and Eric may have something else he wants to share about that. Anything additional? No.
Eric, you're muted. Eric, you're on mute.
Responding to the cue to speak without unmuting myself. I beg your pardon. It was a very encouraging conversation. The captain is very knowledgeable, and I think we all learned a lot.
Any questions for that subcommittee? Great. And then we can move right ahead. Carlos will be posting the meeting days and times for all of our monthly meetings going through to September, just so folks who are wanting to show up to these public meetings or the subcommittee meetings can do so. And for the discretionary policing subcommittee, if that meeting time becomes your regular monthly time, we can go ahead and plug that. Or if you have a different arrangement, we can figure that out as well. Do you know if that'll be your monthly meeting time? Or if you're planning not to do monthly meetings?
We haven't really decided. Give us another meeting to decide.
Perfect. Then let's move right ahead to the main agenda item for tonight. We're so grateful to finally have an opportunity to hear from the chief. And has Kate joined the meeting yet? Excellent. We're so glad you're able to join us just in time for our chat. Thank you for being here, and we're excited to hear from both of you. We've expressed in the past that it would be great to have a chance for Q&A with the both of you, but also to get your opinions on what proactive items you think need to be be part of the discussion. So with that, the first question, and we'll start with Chief Jones, is what changes or reforms would you like to see with regards to policing in our county? With so many areas of policing being looked at and so many telling the police how to do their job, what policing areas do you think need improvement, and where is improvement actually possible, given the constraints of budget and other such items? Chief Jones, we'll have 5 minutes to hear from you, and then we'll move on to the next questions.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening to the commission, and it's good to see you all again. I think there are there are a few issues that are at the top of my agenda. First and foremost, I think much of what you all are talking about as it relates to mental health responses it's right at the top of my agenda and has been for some time. I've been as the county is working towards looking at the crisis now model, which I highly support. Dr. Kroll and I from HHS have been working and had actually collaborated with the hospitals here in Montgomery County, which had come together in order to apply for a grant that would have enabled us to enact this program. And again, it takes a lot of resources when we look at the Restoration Center. And why do I think that's valuable? Because I think it's valuable when we look at a wide variety of not only just mental health type calls, but we also look at substance abuse and other when you look at substance abuse and these continuing issues of issues that we encounter in our daily duties and on our calls, that this would have enabled us to be able to take individuals when we responded to these calls to the center to be evaluated and really take law enforcement to give us other options outside of potentially charging individuals with certain minor petty offenses, as well as to also, again, not to have individuals involved in the criminal justice process at all. So in the long term, I think that is where we really need to be. Where are we in the short term? And again, as we evaluate, and the county's looking at the CAHOOTS model and looking at how do we actually, from a call taker standpoint, even in our 911 center, how do we redirect those calls for service that may not be where, as I have noted on many occasions, the police not needing to be involved in some of these calls that don't involve violence or the threat of violence, and that you have an individual who's simply going through a mental crisis that needs the help from professionals that can provide it. So I'm glad to see that we are starting to provide some additional resources, though I don't think it's going to meet the requirements for a county this large of 1.1 million people. But I think it's a start, and we have to begin somewhere. But I think when we're looking at this, we really have to work towards a greater expansion of this and really put the resources in a program such as the Crisis Now model that I think would be a winning model. Not only does it take a lot of pressure off of us as the police department and police officers to respond to handle these types of calls, but it also takes a heavy burden off of our hospitals and other individuals in the medical field to be able to provide these types of resources to in other locations. As you all know, that there is currently an external audit that is being conducted by Effective Law Enforcement for All. I am excited about the audit because I believe it's going to give us an opportunity from an internal review externally from out within, that we are going to get recommendations for improvement in some areas. And it will also be able to highlight some of the things that we do and how we can do, and we can be better in certain areas in all aspects. I know they've already been to our training academy A consultant has been in that regard. And so with that being said, there are things that are to come. And I believe that this is, again, when I first became the chief of police, I made this recommendation to the council as well as to the county executive, that I thought that this was something that we really needed to help everyone understand from a consultant standpoint, to really do an inside look of our police department of what that looks like. So there's some other things as it relates to training that I think that's important. There is, as we talk about, the duty to intervene as an example. And I am currently exploring, as it was noted in the Reimagined Public Safety Task Force, but I had already had a conversation with Georgetown University to look at our active bystandership training for the duty to intervene, and to look at a program called Ethical Policing is Courageous. So those are the things that I am looking at making some significant changes, and still looking forward to making, once those the audit comes back, how we can continue to move forward on those recommendations.
Thank you so much, Chief Jones. I know we had a question in the chat about, do you know where we can find more information about the audit that's happening?
I know that they are Effective Law Enforcement for All is the name of the organization that is actually doing the audit. It is through the county executive's office. I know that there is a report that is a preliminary report that is going to be due in June, but I don't know if they have any active information out there currently that's actually published anywhere at this point in time.
Thank you, Chief Jones. Let's move right ahead to Kate. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the same question. What changes or reforms you'd like to see with so many areas being looked at and so many telling you how to do your job? What policing areas do you think need improvement, and where is improvement possible?
Okay, thank you. And again, I apologize for being late. It was my misunderstanding about the start and I was in another meeting. So thank you for your patience, everybody. One thing, especially from the union side, we've been advocating for more community policing and shifting towards that. It's mentioned in a later question about gathering stats of arrests, and that it seems to be a large metric, and that we would like to shift away from that as far as ratings go. It shouldn't be just the only thing that officers are judged on. It really shouldn't be anything that's even included in a rating. Interactions, police interactions, positive police interactions is something that should be looked at and encouraged. Not that it's not, but if you take it away from ratings, the statistics away from ratings, and we don't currently have quotas, nor have we for at least the entire time I've been on for 19 years. We don't have quotas, but there's at some levels, and some people are encouraging that data, that statistic. And I think we need to shift, and the union, we think we need to shift away from that. There's been a lot of discussion as well about we need to recruit. You guys know we want to recruit good people. We want to recruit broad people. We would love to recruit people from this area that grew up in the area. And we'd like to see to work with MCPS to try to help and foster and promote classes and stuff that maybe if people are interested in shifting towards a career in law enforcement, or at least if they don't know, get them interested and have them really understand what it's about, and see if we can get some of the young people interested, especially from our community, in law enforcement. But it'll also help bridge the gap and kind of create that community enhancement as well. From another side, there's been a lot of discussion, and I've heard people say the uniform, and I understand that a police officer in uniform with a gun causes a certain reaction, especially to different minority communities. And we understand that, and we would certainly support maybe getting away from that current uniform that we have to something softer and a little bit more relaxed uniform that's not so militant. If that's something in a step in the right direction that could be done, and would that help with that situation? And it's something I personally am interested in seeing if that would help better that situation. We do have that Citizens Academy, and I think it's a great thing, but so many people can't commit to the length of that Citizen Academy. It's a really long time. I think it's like 19, it's a lot. It's a lot once a week, and it's a lot. And I understand that not a lot of people can commit to that. We actually have an officer in the department, and if I had spoken to him beforehand, I would use his name, but I don't want to because I haven't spoken to him beforehand, who created within our department a meeting, and I know the chief has been to it a couple of times, And they meet here at the academy once a week on the same day, same time, and they come and discuss issues. They discuss issues about race in law enforcement, about things that are current events. And sometimes the conversations get heated and sometimes the conversations are great. People get upset, but it's a really good thing to foster within our community in law enforcement. But I'd like to expand that out and have something where we can do that. It's once a week. And I know Chief goes to a lot more meetings than I ever did, but something that's a consistent, and it's not a, we're gonna meet to discuss about this. It's let's come together, and there'd be only a few rules, but that everybody comes with an open mind, and it's a chance to have discussions and open discussions and ask questions instead of come with conclusions, kind of ask questions, and maybe hopefully that would also help foster community relations. Most of us got into this job, myself specifically, because I wanted to interact with people, and I still do, and I want to help people. That's our goal. That's what we do, and I think we can do more, and I think we should, especially with everything going on, but mainly to open the dialogue, because unfortunately with social media, I think people are starting with conclusions and then seeking out that confirmation bias, seeking out only that information that supports their preconceived notion or their opinion, and that's dangerous on both sides. We teach and we talk about confirmation bias and anchor bias, implicit bias, explicit bias. We talk about that in our training to be aware of it so that we can combat it within ourselves. And I think we all need, we need to have a forum where we can sit and even discuss that. And what does that mean? And I would really, I think that's something that could be done.
Thanks so much, Kate. Quick clarifying question. Is the weekly meeting something just for the officers?
Right now, yes, that was something that I'm kind of stealing his model, what he created, and saying that we should do it. But it's helped within our department too, to kind of talk, and I think that's important too, right? That's something that I think people should know that we're doing. We are trying. I think it started with like 4 or 5 people, and like I said, Chief has been to a couple, and I think sometimes it's been 20, 30 people. I mean, our classroom is big that we have it in, and he's really done a fantastic job. This officer that I've known for years, he's done a great job. And I think that's something, again, I'm stealing his idea, but that we could do with the community. But currently, yes, the one I'm referring to is just within the department.
Perfect. I want to do a couple of quick questions about what you've shared so far, and then we'll move on to down the list. I saw one from Cherie that asks, what is the rationale for eliminating the positive interaction info as part of the rating? What would be gained?
And I'm sorry for clarification. That's what should be in the rating, not eliminating it. We should eliminate statistics. We should include only positive, not only positive interactions, but we should include community interactions. That should be the focus of ratings. How do they interact? What's the community engagement? Not only, I mean, there's other things that need to be included in a rating, but and I apologize for the confusion. It should not be a stat-driven rating, is what a statistic-driven rating.
For sure. Robin?
Yeah, I mean, they're both related to what Kate was just talking about. I think underneath this, there is still, you know, a lot of missing information about how individual police officers are judged by their superiors. You know, incentives really matter, and I don't think we have any good information really yet about, you know, what kind of a job evaluation does somebody get who's a beat officer? What are they expected to do, and how is that measured in any way? Obviously, you mentioned arrests, and that brings me to a second thing. There's a lot of information on the open data portal about arrests, but my question would be, I don't see an arrest as an outcome metric at all. The outcome metric is what happens after the arrest. What happens to the person once they've been arrested? And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no electronic connection between MCPD arrest data and court data. There's like a wall there. And so you do your arrest, you send your stuff over, you know, and it's dealt with by the prosecutors or the attorney general's office or whoever. But there's no connection back. You've done your job, you've arrested somebody. But it doesn't seem to me that is the kind, it's just like the same thing with individual officers. If you use arrests as the metric for activity and success, you get a lot of arrests. And if you do that for the police department as a whole, you get a lot of arrests. But it surely the thing that you really, really want to know is what happened. So I'm curious, am I right that there is no connection to the court data? And if so, does anyone have any ideas on fixing that?
So there, that is a, it's not so simple fix when you say, Robin, for example, if I make an arrest, and how is that then followed in the court system? So I'll give an example. If I make an arrest, for example, someone for let's say a theft, and that case goes before the district court. And in our district court, you have two district courts. You have one in Rockville, you have one in Silver Spring. And many of the assistant state's attorneys handles literally probably anywhere from 50 plus cases on any given docket. And in many cases, there are plea agreements that are made. There are diversion programs. There are options, right, that these prosecutors who make a decision on whether or not these cases will be pled out, be dismissed without prejudice for one reason or another. There are a lot of underlying factors that officers may never necessarily know what that outcome is. And so there is no tracking mechanism, you're correct, though the court system does for each case. You can go to case search and you can pull up any individual case and you can see that. But from a district court, if a case, when you talk about how, is that measuring success? Because the state's attorney decides to actually plea a case and provide an outcome that says a person gets a probation before judgment, and person actually gets this program diverted to a drug treatment program as an example, and it won't be prosecuted.
That's
so
fine.
that doesn't necessarily measure really the outcome. And so when we look at ratings, and I just want to kind of stay with ratings for a second. When we look at ratings, each position, whether at each rank, you have different ratings because you have a different job responsibility.
Sure.
So if your job is as a patrol officer, for example, and your responsibility is to go out to address a variety of things. There are policies and procedures that we want to make sure that you're maintaining your policy and procedures that are given under the directions that you are. It's not, you don't have an entire rating that suggests about how many tickets did you write, how many arrests did you make. It talks about it does talk about a lot about how well you write your reports, things of that nature. How are your documents completely filled out? Are your evidence, the evidence that you package, is it done properly? There are a wide variety of different metrics that are shared. It doesn't necessarily mean we are looking at numbers. We're looking at how well did you do your job. Now, I will be the first to say to you all that we have had this discussion for many years, and the discussion still happens about revamping our rating system. We think it is too convoluted in many ways between the different units that we have. How are the ratings actually, assessed? They're actually assessed, subjectively by the supervisor who oversees, and some of those ratings are lengthy. In the categories, it says you either exceed the requirement, you meet the requirement, or you're below the requirement. Those are your three categories. And basically, if it's below the requirements, it's basically you have had to have been counseled in order to improve your performance for that rating. But that rating system goes through our county Office of Human Resources. So any changes that we would look to make to that has to be approved in that regard. So it's really kind of complicated. It's not a simple fix, but it's something that I have been really on, wanting for us to take a hard look and work with our OHR in order to be able to revamp what our system looks like currently.
Thank you, Chief Jones. I know that we have a whole bunch of other topics to get through, and I want to keep the questions we have right now limited to just follow-ups, because we do have a ton of really great topics to delve into. The next question is, after the armed insurrection at the National Capitol, the African American Mayors Association and the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives called for law enforcement leaders and mayors to work together to conduct audits of white supremacy and other forms of extremism within law enforcement agencies, and to take steps to curb radicalization internally. We must root out white supremacy within our police departments to have any chance of destroying this threat to our national security, end quote. Chief Jones, has there ever been any audit or other formal attempt to address white supremacy within MCPD? How can we assure the residents of Montgomery County that the officers who have sworn to protect and serve them are not aligned with white supremacy?
Well, the first thing I will say is that as long as I'm the chief of police, anybody here is connected to white supremacy will no longer be a police officer here in Montgomery County. That's point blank and simple. I will say that we don't have a formal audit. We have not done a formal audit. This issue really just has, of course, risen recently in the past couple of months, and lots of discussion about it. But from a standpoint of us monitoring officers' behavior and anything on social media or any connection to any extremist group, and I don't care if it's just white supremacy, is any extremist group, that will not be tolerated on this department. If we have complaints about any officers, social media that might tend to have these types of thoughts, I can promise you we would actually investigate those. We have not had any in Montgomery County. We did not have any reports of any of our personnel who was at the insurrection. We had officers at the insurrection who were working and who were actually protecting the Capitol. But we did not have any officers that were identified who were a part of that insurrection. Again, if that was the case, but I will say it has raised something I've been talking to other major city chiefs about, coming up with strategies and new ways for us to actually continuously monitor our veteran officers, as well as those who are being hired by us, to make sure that we are, monitoring this, throughout their entire after they hire.
Thank you, Chief Jones. As you imagine that continuous monitoring, and it leads into the next question. You indicated that if social media accounts are reported to you, there is a process for addressing that. But the next question concerns more about proactive monitoring. So prior to being hired, are social media accounts for evidence of their involvement in, as you say, the second part of that is review when they are under investigation. Is there any proactive attempt to look at their social media activity?
So the answer is yes to both of them. We strenuously review any candidate that applies to be a Montgomery County police officer. We do an extensive background into their social media accounts. And we make sure that they acknowledge such accounts. And we look at those accounts to make sure that they, again, meet the criteria for Montgomery County Police, as well as to make sure that they don't have these extremist views. And if we do internal investigations, that we get a complaint about an officer that has posted something that we believe that's improper on social media, we will conduct an investigation to make sure that if it violates any policy, we'll address that accordingly.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be very interested to hear about the results coming out of your conversations with other chiefs about what this continuous monitoring looks like. And we'd love to hear updates about those as you have them.
Absolutely.
The Reimagining Public Safety Task Force had several recommendations around law enforcement culture. For example, enhance accountability and establish goals for hiring, promotion, and advancement that support change and culture. What are your thoughts about the role of hiring, promotion, and advancement in changing law enforcement culture?
Well, I think Kate kind of talked about it a little bit when we talk about sort of a change of mindset about when we're actually recruiting police officers and what does that look like? I mean, one thing about Montgomery County that I think it's important for everyone to realize is that though, we're not necessarily looking for every applicant to have previous police experience. We're not looking for every candidate to have a criminal justice degree. For example, I have a business administration degree with my primary focus in concentration in human resources management. There are people who are social workers who have social worker degrees. Those, again, I think we need to continue to look for a variety of different backgrounds that come into law enforcement that bring a different feel again and bring different experiences that make us diverse. That's, I think, is where we need to continue to be. For me, I think it's important, again, for us to be able to recruit hometown people. I mean, in a community of 1.1 million people, I think it's vitally important for us to be able to find candidates here in Montgomery County of people who want to be in law enforcement and help to guide them. And one of the programs in which we have the police cadet program, where we're actually paying young people, mostly young, who are Montgomery College students. As an example, they could go to University of Maryland Systems if they so choose. The only thing we're asking them is to be a full-time student. We're paying them a part-time salary of about $26,000 a year. They are gaining benefits. They're actually gaining sort of that first step into the law enforcement culture that helps to get them that foot in the door while they're getting their college partially, that they're continuing to pursue their college degree, as we highly encourage. And therefore, once they get the minimum number, at least the minimum number of credits, or if they get their 4-year degree, then they can easily transition into becoming a police officer. That's where I think, again, if we continue to move towards that spot of saying that we want our people here in the county who know Montgomery County, who are diverse. We're going after this diverse applicant pool that I think, again, who brings value, who you don't have to reintroduce Montgomery or introduce Montgomery County to them. They already know the county really well, and they become very easily for us to really adapt them into now being a police officer and not having to learn anything about different communities.
Next question, but it sounds like it's a promising program for sure. We want to have the next question for Kate on a similar topic. In response to an Anne Arundel County police officer being suspended with pay for their participation in the insurrection, the president of Lodge 70, which is for Anne Arundel County, of the FOP stated, "Our department will do a thorough investigation and we're confident that the officer in question acted in a professional manner in their capacity as a private citizen. It's concerning that participation in an insurrection that challenged the foundations of our democratic government could be considered, quote, acting in a professional manner. Sergeant Brewer, at a time when public trust in police is so low, do you understand how officers' participation in such activities, even as a private citizen, can erode trust in the policing system? And how can your organization help assure our residents that the FOP is committed to addressing white supremacy within its own ranks?" Kate, I think you're muted. So sorry.
No, I apologize. The short answer is yes. Of course, I can see how certain things erode public trust. And unfortunately, we don't have all the information with that. There's actually, in everything that I read when I got this question that I could find, said that they did not know and did not release the information as to where that individual was. So was he in the Capitol? And if he was, that's very different than 4 blocks down. We don't know, and that's why the investigation has to be conducted. But I do understand when this information comes out, the feeling of that. As the chief said, to our knowledge, we've never been told, or it's never been brought to our attention, that any Montgomery County police officer took part in the Capitol insurrection. We have never, as a union, we have never received complaints of any white supremacy within the ranks of the police department. However, if we did receive them, we would ensure that the proper reporting takes place, and we would help that officer or union member to report that properly within the guidelines of the department or through EEOC, through the government. And we'll continue to work with the police chief to make sure any officer who shows discrimination against a specific race or gender be held accountable.
Thanks so much, Kate. We'll move on to the next question. In July 2000, a 23-page memorandum of agreement between the Federal Department of Justice and MCPD and the FOP was signed as a product of a DOJ investigation into complaints made against the MCPD by the Montgomery County chapter of the NAACP. The areas of serious concern addressed in the MOA were traffic stops, relationships between the police and the community, complaints and investigations of misconduct, training and career development, and oversight reporting and record keeping. These are among the same concerns facing the county today and are issues of keen concern to our commission and its subcommittees. What measures were taken by the MCPD and the FOP? So this is, we'll go with Chief Jones first and then Kate. What measures were taken by the MCPD and the FOP to meet the terms of the agreement? And are you fully satisfied that today the MCPD remains in compliance with the objectives of the agreement? Chief Jones. Chief Jones, you're muted. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I'm sorry about that. MCPD instituted mobile video systems into all of our patrol vehicles as a result, not all of them, but a large amount of our patrol vehicles as a result of the MOA that was initiated in the year 2000. And we began recording traffic stops into a self-managed database via the utilization of a tool called the Palm Pilot. I am satisfied, yes, that MCPD remains in compliance with the objective of that agreement, despite that this agreement is no longer in effect. I believe that agreement expired, I believe, around 2006 or 2007.
Thank you so much. Kate, would you like to share?
Yeah. And as the chief said, it's expired. MCPD now requires officers to issue written warning citations instead of producing a business card for any and all traffic stops, which includes the officer's ID number. We're not involved specifically with MCPD. We be in the lodge with community outreach program. Right now, as far as formal investigations, there's an extended period of time for the time that it takes for formal investigations. And as far as career advancement, and it's related to funding, but a lot of training for career advancement and the funding within the department has been denied, especially recently and within my own unit, as far as career advancement for instructors to bring back that training and then train to the department. So that's a little bit more outside some of the MOA from 2000, but just kind of hitting some of the same points.
Madam Chair, can I ask one
Please.
question pertaining to that? Yes, it was in effect until 2005, but I also noticed that it is referenced in a recent document that was sent to us by Carlos regarding MCPD budgeting. I wanted to ask, of course, I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Much of what is in the MOA called for computerized data. Much of it in the MOA. So, has there been? Is there computerized data? And if so, may we see it?
Well, the computerized data, Alicia, was the data from the traffic stops. That is where that was the focus of that particular agreement. And the computerized data came from the Palm Pilots that each officer had who was in patrol, who conducted traffic stops. And so that's the data that was downloaded and
To
then
a central
provided.
database? Okay, so,
Yes, yes.
And we do have that data, Alicia.
and that's ongoing.
Well, no, because that's changed, right? So 2000, I mean, that was 2005 as an example. The Palm Pilots are, you know,
No, not Palm Pilots, but
no, what I'm saying, the data, that the process has changed. Now we have a system called ETICS. So now there was Maryland state law that was implemented that now requires all police, law enforcement in Maryland to actually report to the state police on all of your traffic stop data. So all of our traffic stop data goes to one central database at the state level. Okay, so every jurisdiction, including Montgomery County, submits that with our computerized traffic stop ETICS systems. The minute that you do a traffic stop and you're actually putting in the information, whether you write a ticket, a warning, or whatever, that information automatically uploads to the state. That's where that information it's kept.
And I'll finish here. And so nothing other than traffic stop data, nothing other than that.
No, that's part of where, when, you know, we're working with this, with the new bill with the county council, with data collection, that's where some changes are going to be implemented in the near future. So we are working at what are some of the other databases and data sets that we're looking at, whether it's individual stops on the street,
right.
You know, stop and frisk, those sorts of things. We'll be able to capture those, but we have to develop those systems because those systems don't currently exist.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Chief,
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because data is great, but then sometimes it's not. I mean, so this was an MOA as a result of a consent decree or something, right?
No, it wasn't a consent decree. It was an agreed upon. All three parties came together: the county, the police department, and the FOP and the NAACP. Right, correct.
The collection of data is one part of it. What I'm trying to understand is at the expiration of the agreement, what public reporting or what change in policies or programs can you point to that occurred as a result of the MOA?
So one of the things were, for example, complaints. That was one of the major concerns about in the original complaint, was about how complaints were handled by internal affairs. And then our current system of what was.
Can I just stop you for a second? Because I don't want you to answer this ad hoc off the top of your head. I think it'd be really good if you could give, you know, this body a written narrative as to what occurred as a result of the NAACP's as a result of this MOA with the NAACP. That, you know, because data is great, but you know, it's got to result in something, collecting data. And so I think it would be helpful for this body to really understand, you know, what the difference is between the circumstances in 2000 that caused this this action, this MOA to occur, and then, you know, what improvements were made at the conclusion. I just, you know, because
Okay.
I think you just help us understand.
So what I would say is, since this occurred about 15 years ago, we'll have to do some research to provide you all with all of those, so we can answer all of your questions and provide that type of
It may have occurred
Chief.
21 years ago, but we still have several incidents, several
No, I
killings
totally
of
understand.
persons of color.
So again,
Chief.
I'm just saying, we'll do the research. We'll be more
Yeah.
than happy to do the research, but it's going to require us to do the research in order to provide the responses that you're asking for.
Chief,
On to the
one of
next
the things that,
Mr. Ricks, let's just move on because I don't want to get just bogged down in this.
well, I had raised my hand years ago, but that's okay. Go ahead.
We'll come back in just a second. Has there been any other litigation since 2000 alleging racial discrimination?
Well, I'm sure there's been litigation. I don't have anything significant, that's stands out, but I know there's been some litigation, but we'd have to again do some research and what are some of the findings as a result of that. There's been nothing that has been significant for any formal orders by any courts in regards to any of those litigations about discrimination that we've been required to report out on. But there might have been some agreements that have been made.
Sure thing. I think what would be helpful is to look at both the 2000 MOA, but also if, excuse me, thank you. Also, if there were changes in policies or practices as a result of the litigation since then, that would be also helpful for this body to know.
Sure.
Mr. Ricks, you wanted to ask a follow-up question?
Yes, Mr. Duncan was the county executive back when that agreement, when the Justice Department was called in.
Mm-hmm.
I served on that task force. I believe then we had that Palm Pilot program was somewhat of a result of that.
That's correct.
However, if I can remember now, the Palm Pilot program was not a great program because it did not require, or some way or another, the data that was loaded up did not come down to an individual.
Right.
It's just data going up, period.
Right.
And so this program, I believe now, goes through the computer system that works with the car. Is that not right on the?
Well, it goes directly to the officer's ID number. It goes
ID number, right. So it can be disaggregated.
Yes.
Down to that point. So the data this data today is much better than it was back then. And at that time, I believe an individual, if say one person in that group, say if it was 5 people in that precinct group or so, if one person loaded up 20 calls on the computer and the others didn't do but 2, it did not go to that it went as a group, not as an individual. So
thank you so much, Mr. Ricks. We'll keep the points about the data to a limited for now. But
yeah, this is one final question regarding the MOA, since I know that we're kind of organizing questions, Madam Chair.
Let's move on to another one about the collective bargaining agreement. I know we're going to come back to the MOA for some subsequent questions. We know that the current collective bargaining agreement between the FOP and the MCPD is not posted online. Is there a reason why that's not publicly available, Chief Jones?
So the FOP agreement is posted online. I would encourage everyone to go to the Montgomery County government website, look under the Office of Labor Relations, and the FOP contract is listed under, and you will see the collective bargaining agreements under the Office of Labor Relations.
That's very great, and we can move right ahead. One of the recommendations from the task force was to promote a culture of greater accountability by improving transparency through annual public hearings, annual reports on incidents and discipline, and inclusion of the Internal Affairs Division and the Office of the Inspector General in the reporting processes. Chief Jones and Sergeant Brewer, what are your thoughts on this particular recommendation?
So I'm fine with having a annual public hearing. We already publish annual reports to include use of force, internal affairs, crime and safety. There are other reporting requirements that the county council is now is requiring. There are also other reports that the state, there's pending legislation that will probably be required for the department to also post when this legislative session ends. So, with that being said, I believe it is, we're fine with being able to report those things that are required for us to be reporting on and to discuss those reports in as much as we can.
Thank you, Chief Jones. Kate?
Same for the lodge. We agree with the recommendation. Obviously, personnel information should be redacted. And again, most of this should be and is covered, as the chief said, in annual reports.
Perfect. Another recommendation we wanted to get your feedback on was to conduct a risk assessment of police activities to determine the need for and effectiveness of having all officers carry firearms at all times. What are your thoughts on that recommendation? Basically getting to having officers not be armed.
Well, I think the issue of having officers not armed is a liability issue. And I think that's something serious that the county has to look at from a liability standpoint, because a police officer it has to act in case there is something that occurs in that police officer's presence. There is a duty for them to respond. So I think that's something that would need to be worked through with the county attorney's office, as well as I think you also have to think about officer safety from an officer standpoint about their role as a police officer, if they are on duty, and what that, and people noted they're a police officer for their officer safety standpoint, what is their mindset from that perspective?
Sure thing, Kate.
Very similar. We think it would impact negatively the health and safety and the public at large. Violent crime rates are increasing, specifically, especially this year thus far in Montgomery County. My question would be, what would that risk assessment look like? What does somebody think shouldn't be a call that officers are armed? I just have a lot of questions about what the risk assessment would actually be. We did have a situation several years ago where an individual citizen called to report something that occurred earlier, a theft occurred earlier, and he tried to murder a police officer. It was an intentional act to try to murder a police officer, and he called him to his location by saying it was a theft occurred earlier. So I think we can't really say, well, we'd never need it on this call, we'd never need it on that call. Unfortunately, we just don't know. My question would be, what are there calls that police are responding to? And I think it's everybody's question, that could be handled by somebody else. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, though, when somebody calls 911 and we get dispatched a call, we have an obligation to run that call. So we can't say, well, no, it's not my duty. If somebody calls 911, it now becomes our duty to respond. So is it something that's a cultural change that needs to happen, where we're saying police shouldn't be called to a neighbor dispute? I don't know, but that's a shift that needs to happen, and it would be a long shift. But again, saying they're definitely not needed on this call and that call just really can't be said. But I do think, again, please understand, when somebody calls 911 and we get dispatched the call, we must respond. We have a duty to respond to that.
Thank you so much. The next question is looking at plainclothes officers. Does the MCPD look for any particular skills or attributes in assigning officers to plainclothes operations? For example, are there any minimum qualifications? And are there any factors that would disqualify an officer from receiving a plainclothes assignment?
So it depends on what the plainclothes assignment is. We have officers who are officers who work in a plainclothes capacity, who are basically work well in our special assignment teams, who are actually responsible for basically watching for crimes that are occurring in progress. They focus on robberies, they focus on burglaries, they focus on violent type crimes that are happening in progress. And so we train them specifically to make sure that the officer has the minimum qualification of being a police officer. Everyone who's there has to have demonstrated that they have the skill set to do the necessary work that those units might entail. For example, a narcotics investigator who's working undercover. That person has to have, of course, the ability to work narcotics investigation, but have high credibility in order to be able to handle lots, drugs and money. But those are some of the things that we look at and we monitor over time to make sure that those officers are, again, no matter what, they're actually being rated on their performance and acting in a way that we would expect them to, in a safe manner, as well as to do the job efficiently and effectively.
Okay, did you want to weigh in on that?
It's similar. There's qualifications that are outlined in a position, description, defined skills, training, and education, minimum requirements. Yes. When the position's announced, the applicant understands particular laws, procedures, and policies that apply to that specific job. Factors that would disqualify, yes. Lack of experience or skill, severe issues with work performance, in particular, those that relate to the ability to perform their tasks in a plainclothes unit.
And as you might imagine, the concern I imagine behind this question is largely about recent incidents of officers who might not be identified by their uniform being involved in the murder of Kumino Kran and other such potential incidents. So that continues to be a concern here as well. I want to be mindful of time and the fact that we have a ton more questions. I would like to move that we provide this full list to both Chief Jones and Kate to allow them some time to look at all of these questions, in addition to the specific request that Cherie made earlier. We can do that as a formal motion after this one as well. And if both of you think you'd have time to give responses for this back to us by the next meeting, that would be supremely helpful so that we can make sure we get answers to all of this.
So I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Are you referring to the questions that we didn't present this evening, Madam Chair?
Exactly. Yes, so all of you should have received a document from Carlos that outlines the 19 questions. Both Chief Jones and Kate also have a copy of this document. We're moving to have Chief Jones and Kate respond to questions 9 onwards and have that sent to us as a document prior to our next meeting.
And
did you want to say something?
yeah, and Madam Chair, we'll post the answers on the PAC website, right? So folks can see the responses.
Yeah, so similar to how we are having the public meeting now, this would be for the public to view as well. Is there?
And I'm sorry. Can you just? I'm sorry. I know you need a second for the motion, but can you can you just remind me when our next meeting is again so that I can make note?
It is April 6th. Is that correct?
I think somebody said that, right? April 6th before.
I think it's
Okay.
April 5th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Monday. Yeah.
Perfect.
Right, so moved.
Then will all those in favor of this motion say aye or indicate in the chat box if you prefer?
Can you say what the motion was again?
Sure thing. The motion is to submit the list of questions 9 through 19, which was in the document that Carlos emailed to you this morning. Essentially, Dalvin and I compiled all the questions that were submitted by the commissioners, put them into priority order and combined some questions that were similar in tone. So since we weren't able to get through all the questions today, we're submitting these questions to Chief Jones and Kate. Once they, so the motion is to send these questions to them so that they can answer them.
Okay.
Great. I'm seeing yeses in the chat box.
Want us to do yeses or just indicate? Yes. Aye.
Any objections or abstentions can also be submitted in the chat, but I think that is a majority. So we're going to go ahead and say that that motion has passed. Once we have all the other folks away and we can record the official vote for the record if we need to. Thank you so much for your openness in sharing your answers with us. We'll go ahead and send these questions off and hopefully have an opportunity to do follow-ups. I know there were some really great questions in the chat and also ones that people shared with me personally. So let's keep those in mind as follow-ups. I think this was really great to just scratch the surface a little bit of a range of really important issues. And hopefully our dialogue can continue moving forward. Very quickly, are there any items, new business items? And if not, we
I
can go ahead.
I have a short question, and maybe we've already covered this, and I'm just spacing it. But I'm curious as to whether we are going to formally look at the recommendations of the Reimagining Task Force, and work with those recommendations in any way. I don't know if we have discussed this, and maybe I, spaced it. But I would hope that if we haven't discussed this, that we would agree to take those recommendations and review them in some way, and come up with some process to either ratify them, or to say, okay, they may think that, but we don't think that. I mean, I think it would help to, as the county moves forward, to give the county a sort of a ball, if you will, of these are the things that both of these entities agree with. And so this is where we would like attention focused. I don't know if we've talked about that before, but I guess that's the new business.
That would be an excellent agenda item for next meeting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think going through and ratifying every recommendation is necessarily the best use of our full time, but I think having a discussion about people's immediate reactions and just starting this conversation is supremely important. So we'll make sure to add it to the agenda for our next meeting.
Well, might you submit maybe various recommendations to the subcommittees that pertain to that subject area that the subcommittee is covering?
That's my hope. And I know that some subcommittees are doing that informally already. So maybe we just make that a more explicit part of the process. So all of this can be part of our discussion next time. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you all so much for your time this evening. Let's go ahead and adjourn, and we'll see you all next month on April 5th, and prior to that on the March 23rd special meeting.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night, everyone.
Thank you.